Professor James Peterson, who is an MSNBC contributor and a contributor to thegrio.com. And James, I want to ask you about this concept of democracy. You know, we do have this sense in the United States that it is simply about elections, it's about the will of the people. But in Egypt, we have an emergent democracy where the will of the people is essentially being expressed through the military. Do we need to start to create a more fluid sort of concept of what it means to be a democratic country?
Well, people, I think pragmatics and politics, don't always go together here. And at the end of the day, this is a really complicated process, Joy. I mean, obviously, I think Morsi won in the Democratic election with, I think, 51% of the vote. So it was always already going to be a contested situation. I think as outsiders here in the States, we also have to understand that what we think should be the outcomes of the Arab Spring may or may not be that, and that the unfolding of democracy is a messy, messy process. And so, I'm reading the tea leaves here and seeing that there are lots of folk who are real excited about what's going on in Egypt right now, mostly because it's centrist folk within the country rejecting a sort of theocratic development that they just didn't anticipate after their initial revolution in 2011. I think that the will of the majority of the folk in the country are much more interested in achieving some kind of democratic union that does not have a sort of theocratic top-down sort of approach, and the Muslim Brotherhood seem to be implementing that along the way in terms of Morsi's administration there. But again, we have to be really, really skeptical about a military takeover. For instance, what is the timeline? How long before we know when they're going to be elections? And going forward, how do you avoid the same thing from happening again? We have to remember this is still an Islamic country. There still is the capacity for Islamic leadership to ascend once again in terms of any kind of democratically elected leader there. And so it's very complicated, Joy. And I'm not an expert on the region, but I can see that democracy has its limitations when you think about what's going on in the Middle East, in particular what's going on right now in Egypt.